Hello and welcome back to Doctor Who, The Cancelled Years. In this video, we'll be covering Series 3 of United Nations. So, let's get started. Series 3 would have been the third and final series for the show. It would have saw the return of Penelope Wilton as Amanda Powell, Dave Dalekium as Rani, and David Tennant as Jonathan McCrimmon. While Series 1 and 2 would be mostly episodic, it was decided that this series would be one long ongoing story, stretching across the entire 6-week runtime. Similar to seasons 38 to 40 of Doctor Who, however more closely to season 23. Behind the scenes, Paul Cornell joined on as an executive producer, as to ensure the show didn't cross over with anything he was planning for Doctor Who. Julia Gardiner was also replaced by Piers Wenger, the new head of drama at BBC Wales. Stephen Moffat, Keith Barnfather and Elaine Cameron would have remained on from Series 2. However, for this season, Stephen Moffat would have joined on as a co-showrunner. This was to be Moffat's final contribution to Doctor Who, at least for a few years anyways. And now, let's get to the episodes. The first episode would have been The Day We All Lived, written by Stephen Moffat. The story would have set up the basic premise for this series, the premise being, what if the human race lost the ability to die? We see that across the world, no one can die in any way, shape or form. We see that the unit team has begun to investigate what has caused this and seen if there is a way to bring back death. Meanwhile, we see how this has affected the general public, as many believe this to be a sign of God, with half believing it to be a blessing and the other half believing it to be a curse. The story ends with Rani finding a part of what might have caused all this, as she finds a tiny new element in a human body, which has also been implanted into every living thing on Earth. And what piques Rani's interest is the fact that this is alien, and strangely familiar. The second episode would have been Those Who Control the World, written by Catherine Chagana. The story would have split into two interlinking plots. Plot A sees Amanda going to a World Conference Centre, where the important people of the world are discussing the future of Earth and what will happen in the inevitable cases of overpopulation and shortage of supplies. Amanda tries to make reasonable solutions, however her ideas are shut down. Meanwhile, Plot B focuses on Jonathan and Rani. We see that Jonathan is starting to believe that this might actually be a sign of God, and when his family tells him that they've joined a religious cult, they convince him to abandon the unit and join them. However, it turns out that the cult is in fact a bait for terrorists, who simply plan to test the immortality curse by blowing up a bunch of people and seeing what happens. The story then turns into a rescue mission, where Rani attempts to rescue Jonathan and his family. Rani is able to track down and rescue Jonathan, however they're unable to rescue his family, as the bomb begins to count down. The two of them jump out of a window and land in a fountain, just as the bomb goes off. Jonathan makes it out unharmed, however a shard of glass has dug itself through Rani's arm. She pulls out the glass and attempts to heal it using regeneration energy, but nothing happens. No regeneration begins at all. Rani is confused, as she knows she's only on her second life, but for some reason she has no regeneration energy and can't heal herself anymore. It's as if she is now mortal. Finally, the episode ends with the government of the world being forced to announce that once overpopulation begins, new camps will be opened across the world for the critically injured as rescue camps. The third episode would have been Help From Beyond, written by Joseph Lidster. The story would be set 1 month later after the end of episode 2. Research for a way to cure immortality has gone nowhere, and most of the population have turned to religion, with the population now being at dangerous levels, with room on Earth slowly running out. Then one day, Earth is contacted by a race of aliens named the Raleigh, who offer the human race a solution to their problems. They say that they will offer the human race a safe place to live, as they have developed technology on their home planet that allows any living being to live on microdiscs in tiny cities. The government of the world call for a conference, and they all agree that they should talk with the Raleigh and accept their offer. The Raleigh agree to set a meeting, and say that they will bring in their negotiator. The negotiator begins to fade into existence right in front of the Earth's government, and when the negotiator is fully faded in, we see that he is none other than the Master, played by Derek Jacobi. Unit is put on high alert after Rani recognises the Master, though she is confused as to why he is here, as he was confirmed dead during the Eternity War. She ends up theorising that this must be an earlier version of the Master from before the war. Unit tries to warn the government, however they don't believe Unit, as it turns out the Master is using a perception filter that stops people who don't know him from suspecting him as dangerous. The story then sees the Unit team trying to sneak into the negotiation chamber using their own perception filters to expose the Master by cutting out his filter. However, their plan fails as the Master can see past their filters and exposes them as alien spies. Amanda and Ronnie are arrested and taken away by a military group, however Jonathan is able to escape the scene. The story ends with the government of Earth announcing that a deal has been signed and that an alliance with the Raleigh is official, and the human race is free to live on their planet. Portals open up across the world and the human race walks through, and they find themselves on the Raleigh's home planet. And we end the episode with Amanda and Ronnie locked up behind bars. The fourth episode would have been The Breakout, written by Nicholas Briggs. The story begins with Amanda and Ronnie stuck in prison as more and more of the population move to the Raleigh's home planet. The story would then turn into a Breakout story, with Jonathan helping Amanda and Ronnie break out of prison. Once they've escaped, they decide to investigate the Raleigh's planet, so they disguise themselves as poor refugees and travel to the planet with a mass crowd of people. They arrive on the planet's surface, and a group of Raleighs escort them to their new homes. However, the trio sneak away from the group and go off to investigate. After some investigating, they find that the Raleighs are actually using the human slaves to do all their needs, including highly dangerous things with unstable technology, and if any of them disobey or try to rebel, they're cut into thousands of pieces and thrown into the void, where they'll spend eternity in never-ending blackness and never-ending pain. After some more exploring, they find a room containing a machine named the Immortal Drive, which the trio discovers was used to make everyone on Earth immortal. However, as well as making all the mortals immortal, it also makes the immortals mortal, which explains why Ronnie can't regenerate. They theorise that the Master is using the machine to make himself immortal, as Ronnie knows that he's used up all of his regenerations. The trio try to shut down the drive, however they're knocked out by a group of Raleghs, who are being led by the Master. And the story ends with the trio waking up in a massive refugee camp with no way out, looking broken and defeated. And we see in the distance the Master observing the trio and laughing evilly. The fifth episode would have been The Alliance of Immortals, written by Stephen Cole. The story sees the unit trio dealing with prison life and being forced to work for the Raleghs. We see them over time making connections with other prisoners and slowly planning out an escape. They soon discover that although the Raleghs are tough creatures, they're actually mortal and could be taken down. However, the Raleghs have weapons that can cut a human into pieces in under a second, so taking even one down could be tough. We see them over the course of a month, the unit trio making connections and working with other prisoners to smuggle weapons into the prison and prepare to fight back against the Raleghs. And we see in what appears to be a normal day at first, the breakout suddenly begins. Massive fights break out all across the camp between the Raleghs and humans. With the Raleghs being focused on one big resistance, the unit trio are able to sneak out of the camp and make their way to the Immortal Drive to destroy it. However, the Master has stolen the Immortal Drive and is attempting to flee the planet in a space vessel. The Master boards the vessel and blasts off into space. The unit trio hijack a space shuttle and chase after the Master through space. However, the story ends on a cliffhanger as the shuttle begins to malfunction. Amanda and Jonathan pass out due to the lack of oxygen, and the story ends with Ronnie struggling to pilot the shuttle onto the vessel as she slowly begins to die due to the lack of oxygen. The final episode would have been The Night We All Died, written by Stephen Moffat. The story begins with Jonathan and Amanda slowly waking up as oxygen comes back into their bodies. Ronnie was able to pilot the shuttle on board the vessel just in time, though she nearly died in the process, and is now slowly reaching the brink of death. The Master realises that the unit trio are now on board their ship and announces on the intercom that the ship is full of nuclear material, and unless the team surrenders, he'll pilot the vessel right into the Earth. Believing that the Master will try to destroy the Earth either way, the unit team head off into the bowels of the vessel to find and stop the Master. We see the trio fighting off many Raleghs on board the ship, as well as trying to help Ronnie, who constantly keeps passing out. The team eventually reach the main control room, where they take out the last 2 relics and knock out the Master. Ronnie begins to deactivate the Immortal Drive, while Amanda and Jonathan work on steering the vessel away from Earth. The vessel is slowed down and moved out of Earth's range, and Ronnie is able to deactivate the Immortal Drive. However, without anyone realising, the Master awakens and attempts to strangle Amanda to death. Jonathan and Ronnie try to fight the Master, which results in Jonathan being shot in the arm and Amanda being shot in both legs, which appears to have killed her, as well as the control panel to the ship's reactor being shot, which triggers the reactor and begins a countdown until the ship explodes. Jonathan and Ronnie have nowhere to run, with their backs against the walls, and as the Master is about to shoot both of them, he falls to the ground, and we see Amanda holding him to the ground. She tells the 2 of them to run, and that she's prepared to sacrifice her life if it means the Master is defeated. The 2 of them say their goodbyes before dashing off and trying to find a way out. They eventually find a pair of advanced spacesuits, and the 2 of them help each other into their suits, before jumping off the edge of the vessel and falling to Earth just as the vessel explodes. The 2 of them fall through Earth's atmosphere, before falling to the ground and crash landing on the beach. Both of them are badly hurt, and Ronnie attempts to aid Jonathan's bruises on his arm. Meanwhile, we see news reports from across the world as we see thousands of people collapsing to the ground dead, as these are the people who would have died had the curse of immortality not existed. Then we cut to black, and then we fade back in on Jonathan and Ronnie, still resting on the beach. Then out of nowhere, we hear a familiar laugh behind them. The Master. Ronnie turns around to find the Master right behind them. She pulls out a gun and tries to shoot the Master, but he kicks the gun out of her hand and kicks her in the head. Jonathan then tries to shoot the Master, but the Master uses Ronnie's gun to shoot Jonathan through the head. The Master punches Ronnie and tells her that she's been corrupted. She used to be like him, but has been changed by the Doctor into a pathetic, worthless life form. But now he's going to fix that, and that they're going to take down the Doctor together. The Master grabs Ronnie by the feet and drags her to a tree, which we see is the Master's TARDIS. The Master drags her on board the TARDIS and closes the door behind them. And, still looking from the tree from the outside world, we hear Ronnie screaming in horror and pain, before cutting to black and then the end credits. And that concludes Series 3 of United Nations. Overall, this would have been seen as the better series of the show. And with that comes the end of United Nations. While it did have its fans, it wasn't considered as good of a show as Doctor Who or The Pyramid. So join me next time for The Pyramid, Children of Earth. Until then, thank you for watching and goodbye.